Hello. Now, very interesting. The other day, somebody asked me, on the back of Boris Johnson's marriage to Carrie Symonds, whether Boris was actually the first Catholic Prime Minister that we've had since the Reformation, or indeed the first Catholic Prime Minister, because there were no Prime Ministers before the Reformation. The answer appears to be yes, but it needs some qualification. Now, in order to get this sort of thing into context, you have to go back to 2008 and to Gordon Brown, who was Prime Minister at the time, and he, in 2008, he changed the law. And so from 2008 onwards, there was this thing created called the Crown Nominations Commission, which recommended the appointment of bishops to the Church of England. They are still then nodded through by the Prime Minister and then formally approved by the Queen. But up to that point, this was entirely something that was conducted through the office of Number 10. Now, why is this significant? Because if Boris Johnson, as a Catholic, were to go on and appoint, as is his right as Prime Minister, appoint bishops into the Church of England, since the 18th century, the monarch has delegated that job to the Prime Minister. But in 1829, there was an Act of Parliament called the Catholic Relief Act. Now, on the one hand, this was the act which allowed Catholics to sit in the House of Commons. But it also came with a qualification in section 18, which says that should a minister of the Crown appoint or dispose of office in the Church of England and be a Roman Catholic, then they would be guilty of high misdemeanor and barred from office thereafter. So, according to that law, should Boris be involved in appointing a bishop in the Church of England, then he would lose his job. Now there is another law in 1974 called the Lord Chancellor's Law or something, which allows the Lord Chancellor to waive certain duties, and for those duties to be done by another minister, should the Lord Chancellor be a Roman Catholic. So that might give some sort of format for getting around this, but it would still require primary legislation. I'm not sure whether the 2008 Act, which Gordon Brown oversaw, is enough to get Boris out of trouble at the moment. It may well be, actually. But there's a much more interesting question. Is Boris Johnson the first Catholic to sit in Number 10? Well, Michael Gove said rather entertainingly a while ago that Theresa May was the first Catholic to sit in Number 10. Not true. She was the first Anglo-Catholic, and he was talking specifically about her giving up crisps, I think, for Lent. An Anglo-Catholic is somebody from the high church end of the Church of England, somebody who accepts a lot of the sacramental theology, which is central to Roman Catholicism and indeed to Orthodoxy, but not a Roman Catholic. However, Tony Blair is a much more interesting question. And I would say that Tony Blair, this is all an issue about fudging the truth. Tony Blair fudged because he took his faith seriously, and Boris Johnson fudged because he doesn't, apparently. I mean, Boris Johnson, although he was baptized as a Roman Catholic, was also confirmed in the Church of England. Now, this doesn't make very much sense. He's just been married in the Catholic Church. Now, under Catholic canon law, which doesn't accept his former marriages because they weren't conducted in a Catholic church. So those sacraments are null and void. That's the get around clause there. But I wonder whether or not he renounced his confirmation in the Anglican Church, or indeed was formally confirmed or chrismated in the Catholic Church before he was married. It's not necessary, but there is some sort of fudging going on, clearly. Now, Carrie Symonds, is Boris the first person to divorce and then remarry in a Catholic church? Well, no. I mean, he's in quite an interesting lineup. The Emperor Napoleon, you will recall, divorced Josephine because she couldn't provide a child, and promptly married Princess Marie-Louise. Speedy divorce and remarriage in church, I suppose, providing you are running a country. Now, Boris's history, religiously, is very odd. On his mother's side, Boris's great-grandfather was a man called Elias Avery Lowe, who was from Lithuania. He was Jewish. He came to Oxford and was involved in paleology at quite a senior level, and indeed he specialised in looking at Latin texts. So you can see where Boris got his interest in classics. So from 1913 to 1936, I think he was at Oxford. On his father's side, Boris's great-grandfather was Ali Kemal, who was the last minister of the interior in the Ottoman Empire, and he was murdered in a little town called Kalfat in 1922, and his son, Osman Ali Wilfred, I think, came to the UK and was brought up by his mother, Margaret, and took his mother's maiden name, which was Johnson. So that's where you get the Johnson line. So on the one hand Jewish, on the other hand Muslim. Where does the Catholic bit come from? Well, Osman Ali Wilfred said that didn't practice as a Jew in Oxford, and said that if he had any preferred religion, it would be Catholicism, which is the religion that his daughter, have I got this right? Who would be Boris's mother, practiced. Now, Boris's godmother is a strident Catholic, a lady called Rachel Billington, who is the daughter of Lord Longford. So he clearly has a Catholic pedigree there. Now, let's go back to Tony Blair, because Tony Blair was famously and publicly rebuked by Cardinal Hume for going to church in Westminster Cathedral and receiving communion, although he was technically at the time an Anglican. Now, he was doing this routinely, and indeed was called out for doing this, for going to church and receiving communion on his own without his family. He said he only did this once because he thought his family was going to come and join him, and they didn't. Cardinal Hume, it was quite right to call out the Prime Minister at the time, except for this extraordinary event that Tony Blair and Sherry, remember Sherry not only introduces Tony Blair to the Labour Party, she also clearly introduces him to the altar in the Catholic Church, to the communion rail anyway, and he was received in 2007 formally into the Catholic Church. But before that, Sherry and Tony Blair went to the Vatican, where John Paul II celebrated Mass in his private chapel and gave them both communion. Now, his private secretary, who was a man called Archbishop Stanislav, said that John Paul II regarded Tony Blair as being a Catholic in his heart. Now, if it's good enough for the Pope, then I wonder why we're looking at a technicality and a rebuke by Cardinal Hume. So if Tony Blair was a Catholic in his heart, while he was in office and receiving communion from the Pope, then presumably Tony Blair was the first Catholic in office in number 10. Because what is communion? Communion is not only communion with God, but also communion with the community, one's peers in the church. This is why intercommunion is such an issue of debate. You cannot have intercommunion if the churches are separated. So to receive communion is effectively a de facto acknowledgement that you are a member of the church. So therefore, Tony Blair could be regarded, even while he was in office, in number 10, I think, as being a Catholic. The reception in 2007 simply made that formal. So Michael Gove, not for the first time, is wrong about Theresa May, but he's also wrong in general. Boris is technically the first Catholic in office, but Tony Blair may well have anticipated that event. Tony Blair, because he was acting before 2008, therefore may well have fallen foul of the Catholic Relief Act of 1829. You see how exciting all this is. Anyway, look, I'm going to stop there because I'm rabbiting on a little bit, and you can find much of this detailed in my blog, which is at animate-tim.com. Otherwise, please subscribe to my channel, and there's a button down below. I think there's a bell thing. I've never quite found the bell, so if you find it, please sort of ping it for me to let us all know that it actually exists. And I look forward to seeing you again. Please add your comments. You may think I'm wildly wrong, in which case please tell me, and let me know what other subjects I should be covering. So thank you very much for joining me. Bye bye.